Great, well welcome and thank you all for taking time out and inviting us to come to speak. Again, I'm Catherine Boyer with Child Welfare in Program Development, and we were asked to kind of come and present a few different things. We got a range, but we're going to present kind of an overview of child welfare services, how to give you a little context as to the services that we offer, how they work, that sort of thing. And then again, as we said at the end, if you have other bigger picture questions or things totally unrelated to what we talked about, but that are child welfare related, we will do our best to answer those as we go. So next slide. So this is kind of what we do in child welfare, and I think it's important to know that the main thing we do is we really strive to not take children necessarily from their families, but our goal is really to keep kids in their families if their families can be made safe. And so you'll see we have foster care on there, but that's not the only thing we do, and certainly not the most important as far as helping families. So we offer a lot of services, as we'll go over later, that promote family support and strengthening, as well as services that are related to foster care, adoption, independent living, and beyond that. So slide 3. So this is kind of an overall picture of our structure and kind of where we live in the grand scheme of things. So that's why we're big. It's not that we're more important. That's just to kind of show you where we fit into the structure. So you've got DHS, the Department of Human Services, and then we're one of those 8 divisions, and then within those social service division, we're with those other 2 branches. So slide 4. And then this is just to give you some context. In Neighbor Islands too, this might be helpful to know what's available in your area.
Shut off the lights in front of the screen.
Second?
I was just asking them to shut off the lights in front of the screen so you can see better.
So Oahu definitely has the most. We have the most volume on Oahu. So we've got some specialty sections, like all of intake is located on Oahu. So if you call in a child's concern about a child's welfare, it's going to come to our Oahu unit, and then they'll, if they decide to assign it for investigation, they'll filter that out to the neighbor island units. And then this is where how many units you have on each of your islands. Go to the next slide.
That's me. So part of what I'm going to be talking about is the flow chart of where, when a case comes into child welfare, how a case gets assigned, what happens after it gets assigned for services. So we start here at intake. It comes in through a phone call made by a mandated reporter, which would be any of you folks, as well as the police, any doctor, anybody who believes that a child is in need of services of any child abuse or neglect. A phone call comes in to our intake hotline, which, like Catherine said, is on Oahu. At that point, an intake assessment is done over the phone. Many questions are asked. Who is the child? Who are the parents? What is the concern? And who the reporter is. All of that information is done by phone, and then we make a determination whether or not the information is registered and held in our database system because it has not reached the threshold of safety or risk in our Hawaii Revised Statutes 350. So that information is held in our database. So say if Catherine is the neighbor, calls in a concern, and then, calls in a concern, doesn't have quite enough information, that information is held in our database. But Teresa here is a school counselor, knows more information about the family. She will call it in. That information is put together with Catherine's information that she shared, and then it may push it over the threshold of risk or safety. Then it is assigned depending on whether there is risk, which means there is no safety. It means that there is a concern for this family and they may need some services. That would fall under family strengthening services. And on the various islands, we have different providers. It could be PACT, it could be Catholic Charities, it could be Child and Family Services. It is a contracted agency through the department that those services are provided at a low risk. So it could be maybe a family is not taking their baby for their well baby checks. and they just need a little bit of assistance of being assigned a public health nurse. That would be an example of family strengthening services. The next level up would be VCM, which is a moderate risk case, which would mean that it could be that same well baby check, but parents are actively using substances, but they live in the home with the grandparents who can also provide oversight of the child. So we would have somebody going into the home and working with the families. Those two areas are voluntary. Families work with the providers voluntarily. If information comes in and we believe that there is a safety concern for the child, whether it be psychological, physical, mental health, some type of safety concern, it will then be assigned to child welfare. So if there is a safety concern, it is assigned statewide to a child welfare worker. At any point under family strengthening services or voluntary case management, if they go out to do that, to talk with the families and they find that there is a safety concern in the home after speaking with their families, they can transfer it or they can have it reassigned to child welfare. Same for child welfare. If we go out and we do our investigation and we find that there is no safety concern after actually being in the home, talking with the families, talking with the children, talking with our collateral contacts, we believe that there is no safety concern, but they do need some assistance, we can refer it to VCM or to FSS. So that is just the intake process. That is what happens after a phone call is generated and we look at Hawaii Revised. So mandated reporter falls under the Hawaii Revised Statutes 350. And that's how we base our information on where we would place a case. Next slide. Well, I'm going to continue with the flow chart as it goes through the presentation.
And so what we'd like to do with this slide is just to give you a big picture of the range of assignments. And what we really try to do, and which is authorized by the federal government in the Child Abuse and Prevent Treatment Act statute, is that we're trying to best match the needs and level of intervention to the family. So we don't, if a family has some low-risk issues, they need to be connected to resources in their communities, we want to offer a community provider to help them and maybe to link them or help them access a resource. So it's not every call is going to come in is going to be assigned to a social worker for an investigation. So we're really trying to triage it and best meet the needs of the family. And so what you can see here in this slide is the numbers of calls that are assigned for intervention. It shows you the distribution of what level families are receiving. And so we still, many do come in for investigation, but less than half when you look at the total assignments. We have a higher number going to our voluntary case management services, and then also over 1,000 families a year last year are getting family strengthening services. So it's really nice that we have these community providers who they try to find people who live and work within the community to partner with families and to support them in the areas of need. Do you want to, any questions? We'll pause here. This is kind of our intake assessment piece where we talk about a report, things we consider. We're looking again at present or impending danger that we really need to get out right away. That would be a social worker assignment with the Child Welfare Services. But if there's a range of risk, we're referring families to community providers. Hi, how are you? Nice to see you.
So, of course, I'm representing families of kids with disabilities. I'm wondering what the level of knowledge base is regarding these disabilities. Because I've known so many families over the course of my career who have been falsely accused of abuse and neglect because folks didn't understand the child's needs. And once that happens, the family is so traumatized, it's really hard to come back.
Sure. Okay. So I'll just try to summarize that question. The question was thinking about families and serving children with special needs, what kind of information or how well are we able to assess and partner with families? Because if a report is made, someone is thinking that the child is being abused, It's very traumatizing to the family. It's a large level of involvement, and it's then are the people who are assessing and partnering with the family, are they knowledgeable about the child and their needs? And so I think that's a great question. And what we really try to do is find out what people know and what the family knows. It starts with the family, like tell us about your child and tell us what their needs are. When Lori said we talk to collateral contacts, we talk to doctors, service providers, others families can refer that know the child and work with the child if they're in the school or if they're receiving early intervention services. We would try to bring all that information together to understand what's being reported and what we're seeing. So it's really trying to kind of bring it all together. Does that make sense? Did you want to explain?
So, and one thing that I can add is there's such a great variety of types of problems and issues and specific needs of the different children and families that we work with, that although we offer training to our staff, and we initial training and ongoing training to help them to know a little bit about all of these issues, whenever someone gets a case, let's say maybe someone's first time working with a child, the child's autistic, and that's not something they have a lot of experience with, then when that comes up, they work with the supervisor and get more information on those issues and topics. They might know a little bit from when they initially were trained and some of the in-service trainings we provide, but the issues that they have, that the staff are confronted with, are so broad. There's so many different things that I would not say our staff are experts in developmental disabilities. They're not. They know a little bit, and they know a little bit about what's available, and then when they're confronted with, when they have a case or a situation, then more work is done to do research and get them up to speed. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I think what's important is also what Teresa had said. When we're making an assessment of a family, it is never in a silo of us as a worker doing that assessment by ourselves. What our responsibility is to be able to collect information, like Teresa was saying. So we go out to see the family, and we say, please explain your family situation. And we sit down and we ask them like questions like, if there's a concern, a behavior concern with your child, what kind of discipline do you use? What do you do? And some will say timeout. We get a wide variety of responses. It could be, we give them spankings on the butt. We give them timeout. We don't do anything. There's a wide variety. So we ask them, how do they parent their child? We ask them about concerns in their home, or how does their family run? There's a huge number of questions that we ask them, so we have a better idea of how their family functions. We don't go in with the idea just because we have an intake from somebody saying, this is the end all, this is the be all. We ask them how they function. We ask them what their strengths are, what their needs are. And then we also will talk to them about who their service providers are. So like Teresa was saying, we do call the PCP. We call their primary care physician. We talk, if they're in school, we'll talk to the counselor. We'll talk to the actual teacher, because teachers are a huge form of information for us, because they see the kids day in and day out. They are usually the ones that can provide the most information for us in any change of behavior of something that may be happening in the home. So we do not make our decisions in a silo by ourselves based on only the information from the reporter. So when we go out, and if it reaches the level of safety or there is a concern for the child, that is when we would most likely either have to look for a family member to move in to help support this family, or a service that could help support them, or we may need to have to remove them from the home and ensure that they're safe and continue to provide services to the family. So it's not only us one worker making the decision based on the information that's called in.
And just that we'll get later to it, but about our service involvement with others is so important, because if a family doesn't have access to services or doesn't know about a service, or maybe the child's needs haven't been assessed, and they're not really sure why their child is behaving in a certain way, we really try to partner up, and that's where our community partners are so important, that we're able to refer families if they've never gone for an assessment or they've never sought out services. We really find ourselves trying to bridge them to other resources. But we'll get to that in a little bit.
And we do have a multidisciplinary team that we do use to as knowledge. So there's a doctor for consultation. There's a medical doctor, a psychologist, a social worker. So because we do not have all the information about various needs of different children all the time in detail, we do access our multidisciplinary team for consultation. Okay? Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so it's me again.
Next slide.
Yeah.
So this is the next slide. This is the initial assessment phase. So once a case is assigned to child welfare, there is found a safety concern based on the phone call. It is then assigned to the assessment worker. During that, assessment worker will then conduct their investigation. That means they go out and they talk to each child in that family. They will talk to each parent. They will talk to each school official. They will talk to the medical doctor. They may talk to the therapist, whoever is involved with that family, to get more background information like I just shared. And they have 60 days to come up with a disposition. And that disposition will be either confirmed or unconfirmed. During that time that we're talking to that family, if there is a safety concern in that home and that home is not safe enough for the child to remain in, we will then get the police involved, and police will take custody of the child. The department does not take custody of the child. We need to get the police involved, and they will come and they will do a police protective custody and then turn the child over to the department, and then we will follow through with placing them in foster care if need be. If we can leave them in their family home and continue to monitor, we may still confirm. So these are the two outcomes after our investigation. It's either we're going to unconfirm, so the allegations that were called in from the mandated reporter is what we will look at. And we don't only look at, so say if it's domestic violence and substance abuse. That is not all that we're going in the home to look for. We do a very broad overview of what is happening with the family. So it could be that there is substance abuse and domestic violence. We may also find that there's sex abuse, or we may find that there are mental health concerns. And we ask a number of questions to be able to find out exactly what's going on with that family during the investigation. And we're always investigating and we're always assessing through the life of the case. But at some point, we do need to make a determination. So if the allegations that have been called in, if we do find substantial evidence that these things have happened, we will then confirm the case. We will confirm that there is abuse or neglect based on the findings of our investigation. If we do not have any findings, or it does not reach the level of safety, we will unconfirm the case. So if it's unconfirmed, the case can be closed. All information is documented in our database system. It can be closed, or we can refer it to VCM or FSS. If it is confirmed, we will have participation by family court, or we have a voluntary foster custody agreement that the parents agree that children should remain in foster care, and we can then follow through with providing them services. Or the children will be remain in the family home, or they will have to be placed outside of the family home, or we can confirm that that there was abuse or neglect, and we can also close a case based on those findings. So that's what happens at the initial assessment. That is assigned to one worker. If we do police protective custody, so in the 3 days, we have 3 days to file a court hearing during police protective custody if the kids are taken in to police protective custody. During those 3 days, we need to interview all children in the family home, all parents, and as many service providers as we can to be able to collect as much information as we can to write a report to the court, because we need to have that court report into family court within 3 business days, and within 5 days we will be into court to see the judge with the family to come up with a determination if we're going to be moving forward, or the judge says we don't need to provide, we can close the case, or they don't find a reason to have them involved with family court. So all of this happens usually within 3 days, at the most 60 days. Okay, next slide.
And this again is just to give you a picture of the families that are assigned to a child welfare services worker for an investigation. This shows you the confirmation rate. So of all the families that are assigned, you'll see that the rate is somewhere between 35 and sometimes a little bit higher of 40%. So of all the reports that we get and we assign for investigation, not all of them end up, and less than half end up being confirmed for abuse and neglect.
So, sorry, I just want to share one thing. When a call comes into our intake hotline, it can be a wide variety. It could be, hey, can I get a service? Can you tell me about what needs to happen? Many of the phone calls that come into our intake hotline are consultation phone calls. And as a mandated reporter, as I train mandated reporter training, that is one of the big things that I do share, is that if you don't know what you should do, call into our intake hotline and they will be able to help direct you. You should never feel like, I don't know what to do, and I don't know if this child is being abused or neglected. What is my responsibility? Just call it into the hotline and they will help direct you through the process, or at least take that information.
And it's also helpful to realize that, so Teresa was saying, these are the cases that were investigated by child welfare, and then of those, only this percentage have been confirmed. And then all of the confirmed cases, all of those children do not enter foster care. From what Lori is saying, remember that some of them can be serviced in the home, even though we confirmed, or resolved very quickly, and the case can be closed. So we'll talk about numbers in foster care in a little bit. But
one of those examples I'm just going to say is, like, say you have a 17-year-old who got in trouble, didn't come home when they were supposed to come home at their curfew that their parent told them to come home. The parent, they come home, they hit him on the shoulder. How come he didn't come home? The parent is upset. Rightfully so to be upset, because their teen could be out and about. Anything could happen. They're upset. The teen goes to school, tells the counselor, oh, my dad was so mad with me and whacked me on the shoulder. As the counselor, it is their responsibility to, if they believe, and the child says, I'm so afraid, and it is their responsibility to call it in. We go out. It is our responsibility to do an investigation. There was actually a hit to the shoulder. We go out, the dad says, you know what, I lost it. It's the only time I've done this. The child says, yes, my dad never hit me before, but he was so mad. It's my fault. I didn't come home. We can confirm that it has happened, and this it's always on a case-by-case situation. We can confirm that it was happened, but there may not be a need for services, and we can close the case. So that's how we can confirm it, but not all of them are in foster care.
we're going to move on, yeah?
Yes, we're moving on to the next slide, which is human trafficking of minors. So this is, we have this here as kind of a placeholder, and we just wanted to let you know about this. But there was a federal law, Public Law 114-22, and that's requiring states to add a new definition of child abuse and neglect to their statute. And the definition calls to include sex trafficking of minors. And so it's a little bit different for child welfare services. Usually we're looking at the parent or caregiver, but this can include those who are not related to the child. So as of May 29th, 2017, there was a House Bill 1099, which was signed into law, which, sorry?
That like last week? It's just like
Yes,
off the presses?
yeah, so this is really
Yes,
new.
hot off the press.
Oh my gosh.
Brand new
This
information.
is the place to be, man. You can drop some bombs in here.
That's right.
So that effective May 29th, 2017, the statute has changed of our definition of child abuse and neglect to include sex trafficking of minors. So we will accept calls or reports of suspected or known sex trafficking of minors, and we'll refer them to a community provider for assessment, identification of whether the child is a victim of sex trafficking, and services if needed. So that's new, and that we'll be seeing more. We'll have statistics later on. We are already assessing our youth in foster care at periodic points in time if they leave their resource home or they seem vulnerable for a variety of reasons. They are a target population, so we're trying to make sure that we're continually and ongoing assessing them for trafficking as well. So that's something we've been doing, but now this reporting piece is very new to child welfare.
All right, but we're gonna move back to Lori.
Okay, so after the investigation is done, it is then assigned to what is called a permanency worker. So for those of you that have worked with child welfare before, those are like our case managers. But now they carry the case from when it's assigned to them as a case manager all the way through permanency. So they are called permanency workers. It's assigned to a permanency worker. During this phase, after it's been confirmed and we're providing services, they do the dispositional hearing, the service plan hearing if it has not been done with the assessment worker. It's usually done with the assessment worker and followed up with the permanency worker. And this is where they talk with the family. We continue to monitor the family and determine what kind of other services are needed. So whether it's substance abuse treatment, and we refer them to residential or outpatient. They will have to usually do random drug screens, AA meetings, parenting classes, mental health classes, domestic violence classes. There's a wide range of services that we can refer them to, and it's based on the need for their family. We monitor them for 12 months or 15 out of the 22 months. So that's the Adoption Safe Families Act of 1997. Prior to 1997, many children remained in foster care for 3, 4, 5 years without parents having to a certain amount of time to do services. Since 1997 in the Adoption Safe Families Act, parents now have 12 months, what is called reasonable efforts, to do their services. The department has 12 months to provide them services. And if they're not fully involved with doing their services, about the 9th month, the department will look to file to terminate parental rights. This happens because children remaining in foster care for an extended period of time, it's not beneficial for them. They need to have some stability, so that this helps our department to work even closer with the parents, and it helps the parents to realize that they have a set amount of time to do services. 15 out of the 22 months. Many of our cases, the kids go back home, parents relapse or something happens, they come back into foster care, they go back home. So this is to help prevent this in and out of foster care. So if in 22 months, kids have been in foster care for 15 out of those 22 months, it's also the department's responsibility by our federal law that we need to file to terminate parental rights as well. So this happens during the case management section of the flow chart. So either in 12 months or 15 out of 22 months, jurisdiction is terminated at court and the case is closed, kids are returned home, families have demonstrated So it's not just that they've provided, that they've attended services, they've had to demonstrate how they are able to provide a safe, stable, and nurturing home for these children, for their children. If that can happen, jurisdiction is terminated and the case is closed. If they're not able to do that, the department's responsibility is to file a permanent custody motion, and parental rights will be terminated based on the court's finding. So the court is the one that will determine whether or not parental rights are terminated.
Okay, great. So moving on to the next slide.
This just gives you an idea of the number of children in foster care by age, and this is for the whole, it's broken down by state fiscal year. And so children do come into foster care and go out during this year, but this is the total number served during that point in time, or for that year period. And what, Lori was talking about the process of working with the family, and we're doing a lot of simultaneous work. We do what's called concurrent planning, where we're engaging relatives, we're looking for people who are connected to the youth, people who know the youth, and we're trying to partner closely with their resource caregiver. We used to refer to them as foster parents. We call them resource caregivers. But we're looking for relatives to be resource caregivers or someone that the child knows well. And as much as we can, we're focusing on placement stability, supporting that caregiver, as well as supporting the parents to work on areas of need and while maintaining that child in their resource home. And so it's all these efforts that go along at the same time, so that if we do get to that 12-month mark and we're not able to return children to their parents safely, we already have someone who the child has been with, has a connection with, and that might be their adoptive parent or legal guardian. So it's all concurrently happening along the way.
Before moving on, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but you can ask questions at the end. If you're looking at the numbers and saying, I see a trend, it's going up. There are more children in foster care each year. So if we went back further in time to like 2003, you would have seen a great drop in the number of kids in care. And then right around like 2010, it kind of leveled out. It was a huge drop from like 2003 to 2010. And then 2010 it leveled out, and now it's starting to rise slowly. And it mirrors what's going on nationally. And if you have questions about that, we can talk about it more in the question and answer period. But I didn't want to pretend that that wasn't there. We know that it's there. We're looking at it. We have some ideas about maybe why it's happening. And you can see, although it's rising across the way, if you had the percentages, you'd also realize that the increase in the youngest kids is greater than in the other age ranges. Anyway, we'll move on, but if that's something you want to talk about more, we can. Yes? Okay.
Okay, me again. Sorry. This is the ending. So the permanency worker will continue on to provide services and work with the adoptive or legal guardians. So this is after parental rights have been terminated. We still continue to provide them services, provide services to the kids. And I think later on we're going to talk about some of the youth services that are available to them. We monitor for about 6 months after parental rights are terminated to make sure that this is the right placement. And like Teresa was saying, these kids have been in the homes for an extended period of time before we even look to adoption or legal guardianship. Once adoption or legal guardianship is ordered, court jurisdiction is terminated, and the adoption case is closed. We, as a department, continue to monitor this family until the child is 18 or they age out of the system, and they have the option to continue to get services through the department, which we're going to talk about later in the slideshow. And we continue to pay more times than not. It's very rare that payment stops, but we have adoption assistance and permanency assistance, which will help them with their needs, their everyday needs, and things like going to prom and all of those kind of things. They'll continue to get money, and we monitor them until they're at least 18 years of age, even though they've been adopted or have a legal guardian. And those resource, their adoptive parents and legal guardians also have support groups and yearly trainings that they can utilize as well.
And I wanted to make a comment about the payments so that you know when children are in foster care, their resource caregivers, also known as foster parents, receive money to help pay for their daily needs, right? And then this part at the end that says payment only cases, that if the child is adopted or enters legal guardianship, the idea is they still get that money, so that there's no disincentive to adopt a child or to become the legal guardian. And some states don't have that, and it wasn't always that way in Hawaii either. But that's one way where a family can make that permanent commitment, but still get the additional help, a little bit of monetary help that they need for those daily expenses.
And it's not millions of dollars, because
It's not.
some kids can eat the amount of money.
Yeah.
You have some big kids. I mean,
Yeah.
you have like football player kids that, or like, and it's, those of you that have kids know what I'm talking about,
Yes.
right?
So, but I did want to make that point of like, well, what is that money and what is it for and what are you paying them? And it's not the same in many other states.
It is not payment to the resource caregiver. It is not for them. It's not like they're getting paid.
No, it's
not like a job.
It's to cover the expenses for the child. Yeah. Gonna move on. So since we were just talking about what happens at the end of the case, one way to think of outcomes for children in foster care is to think about what happens when they leave, or how do they leave. So the point of this this data here about termination types, there's different ways that you leave foster care. And so if you're looking at it, the big, tall blue bar is reunification with the family. Hope the main thing you get out of this is the vast majority reunify. And then the other pieces are like small parts. That then the next one is, the orange is the adoption, and the gray is legal guardianship, and the small yellow is emancipation. If you added up all those percentages, you would not quite meet 100%, and that's because 2 to 3% go somewhere else. They leave care because maybe they become under the jurisdiction of CAMHD, and you take over the case and are dealing with the case, or another agency might take over the case. A very couple occasionally each year die in foster care, usually due to abuse that happened prior or to a medical condition, not because they were harmed in foster care. But the 2 to 3% are like other reasons for leaving. And so in the next slide, you can see the numbers that we're talking about. So it's the exact same information as on the prior slide, but this gives you the number of young people that we're talking about. And so you can see like the other category, but crucially the one that most people are interested in numbers is emancipation, which is aging out, also known as aging out. They reach 18 and they're still in foster care. No one has adopted them. They haven't gone back to their family. There's no legal guardian. And that's the emancipation column, the one that a lot of people are really focused on. What about those young people? What happens with them? We're going to talk about that in a little bit, what happens to children as they transition out of care and the services, because I know that that's a focus. But this gives you the sense of what those numbers are, and it has been dropping. And we are proud of that. Not that you should be proud, 66 kids, in state fiscal, that's not like, woohoo, but considering what had been in the past and that it has been dropping, we are pleased that we're bringing those numbers down, since that's the least desirable termination type or outcome. Do you have questions about like leaving foster care and what can happen? And again, I just want to remind you, like, keep this in mind with the blue bars. Well, that's our goal, is to get kids back to their families. When relatives become the permanent caretakers, that's not included in those blue bars. They're included in the adoption or legal guardianship. You had a question?
Just a quickie.
Yeah.
You said emancipation is the least preferred
Yeah.
outcome. Is that because they don't have the skills or the resources to?
So I think that it's the least desirable because they age out of the system at age 18. I have an 18-year-old son. he is nowhere near ready to be free in the world without some guidance. Most 18-year-olds are not free and ready to be on their own. And if you don't have an adoptive family or a permanent family, you're pretty much out there on your own trying to figure out how to get a bank account, how to pay for your college, how to find a place to live. And so that's why I think we're saying that it's the least desirable emancipation, being out there on your own with without a permanent
have a family.
connection.
You don't have a,
legal connection.
you don't have a permanent legal family, which seems not good, not helpful in going out into the world. So in terms of least desirable, our staff work toward first priority, get them back with their family. If you can do that safely and possibly. If you can't do that because the family can't become safe or can't step up, then the next best thing would be adoption, and the next best legal guardianship. And if that can't happen, then they might emancipate from care. Does that make sense?
It does, but typically the courts look at 18 as the age of emancipation, so it's hard to have a legal guardian at 18.
So what we're saying is that not to have a legal guardian, but that this 18-year-old has a family that they can go to, so that they've been adopted. And so, like for me, growing up, I turned 18, I had a job, I went to college, but I knew that if I had any questions, I had a mom and a dad to go to. Some of these kids that emancipate, they don't have that. And that is what's concerning to us, is that so one thing I always think about is, where is this child for Thanksgiving or for the holidays or whatever? Is this child going to be missed at any table? And to us, that's important, because not only do they need to understand how to pay their bill and how to find a place to live, are they missed at a table? And that's what, as a worker, that's what I thought about all the time. And strived and worked really hard to find them a permanent family that they could be connected to, so that if they went to college, everybody goes home during summer break, do they have a place to go to? And that's why emancipation, that number of 66, which may seem smaller in the big picture, is actually pretty big, because that means there are 66 kids out there just from our department that have no permanent connection to anybody. So that's why it's concerning.
But you are going to talk about like the resources available.
Yeah.
There are some resources.
Yes, we have we do have quite a few, and we are eager to get to that. As we move through the rest, I want us to be conscious of the time, since we're like, we want to make sure there's time for comments and questions.
Yes.
So for some of it, we can just touch on briefly. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So this next slide, service tools and initiatives that are coordinated or provided by Child Welfare Services. These are examples of things that we've done to change our system to improve practice. We've started partnering with specific communities to make sure we're reaching out and connecting with them to see how they could be involved in supporting families in our system. When we identify an area of improvement, which we'll talk a little bit about, our continuous quality assurance improvement system, we try to develop new tools or resources to be responsive to that. So for an example, our child safety assessment for children in foster care, we developed that so that we could consistently assess their safety in their resource caregiver setting. And another one that stands out is looking at how we identify and engage fathers in our case planning. So that's another initiative that we worked on a few years ago, where we saw an area needed and an opportunity for improvement. So I'm not going to go over these directly in detail, but we want you to know that we're always looking at our practice, and we're always trying to think about ways that we can improve our system. And so these are some recent standouts of things that we've worked on. And specifically here, this next slide is the services contracted by Child Welfare Services. So we try to research and target specific services for families and youth who are involved in child welfare services related to abuse and neglect. And so when you look at this, it's a pretty broad array, and they kind of target key areas. So you'll see our Ohana conferencing and our family finding and family connections. Those speak to engagement, really engaging families in the planning process, understanding what's going on, why they're involved, who are their support system, and coming together to make a plan. Also, the family connections is so important because we need to notify relatives anytime a child enters foster care. We need to identify and notify them within 30 days to see if they want to be a placement option, they want to be connected to the child, or maintain a connection that they already have. So that's really important to us. And then you'll see a lot of these services are what we kind of call our core services to families. So we have comprehensive counseling and support services that works on helping the family, the parents with life skills. It could include therapy. It includes skill building, teaching them appropriate parenting skills and resources with their child depending on their child's age. We have home visiting programs. And then we also have an array that's targeted towards the youth in foster care. We have our independent living program. We have therapy and support for them, and we connect them to other resources. So you'll see this is a list, but it's our child welfare services array to families and children involved in our system.
And just before we moved on from that, I want to be clear that the Department of Human Services, Child Welfare, purchases these services, and then they're offered for free to our families that are involved in our system. So our parents and children don't pay anything because we already paid for the service. The state paid for it. But the only people who can get it for free are those who are involved in child welfare, right? Okay. I want to move on. So these are just a few examples of, we also use services in the community, and there are services that we use regularly that we did not contract with, that we didn't buy, that are out there in the community that we refer our families to, or that our families take, the families that we serve and that we work with take a lot of advantage of. So certainly, for an example, is many families that come to us have substance abuse challenges, and we might refer them, they might end up using substance abuse treatment, inpatient and outpatient. We don't directly fund that. Sometimes that's through their medical insurance they can get it, or sometimes there's other external funding that can get them in. But those are services available in the community that our families touch on. And there's a lot of resource information in the community that we refer our families to. You see, certainly we deal with families where housing is a big issue. I know you all do as well. And so having the homeless shelters or transitional shelters is also a resource that our families tap into. So these are some examples of just sort of, initially we showed you what do we provide internally, child welfare, what do we contract, and then there are things we don't contract that we tap into. And then next is like you guys and all the other people. So the next slide.
So this next slide, the services provided or administered by other state agencies or other community agencies. What we really want to emphasize is that families live within communities, and families access or should access services in their communities. And we come in when there's a time where parents need assistance. And so what we want the picture for you to see is that we want to help keep families connected or connect them to the resources. Sometimes we do get involved because parents haven't known about or had the ability or the skills to access services in their community, and they don't quite understand who can do what or what's involved, or how do I even start this application process. It's very overwhelming at times. And so our part of our work is really identifying and connecting families to resources that can support them. And so you'll see these are common to many of us, working with the Department of Education, maybe the Child Adolescent Mental Health Division, and other resources that you see other people accessing. So really, again, the point is they come into our involvement at a point in time, but we're really hoping that they'll be able to identify and access resources and improve their protective factors, because other challenges may come up along the way. And so once they have those skills to contact and seek out resources, they'll be, fully thriving in the communities that they live in.
Okay, now I know that you're interested in outcomes, and we have some information we can share on that. We wanted to also share sort of how we think about outcomes, like how we organize our ideas around outcomes, and then also I have a little bit of actual data. in addition to the termination types of where they leave, that's one kind of outcome, like what happened to them. But then you also care about other stuff too. So in the next slide, it just reminds you of what are our outcome areas of focus for child welfare. There are three major ones, and they're the same for every state in the country in terms of child welfare or child protective services. What do we care about? Safety, absolutely, making sure that the child can live in a safe place, is free from harm. And then the permanency piece we use in a particular way. What it means in child welfare is that they're in a stable, permanent home with permanent supports, like that they're not moving around all the time. Different home, different home, different home, different people caring for them, or going in and out of foster care, that they're stable in their home environment and they're stable people caring for them. And then well-being is the one where probably most of you all would come in and interface with us, which is broad. That the well-being includes a lot of the mental health pieces, but it also includes things like a recent initiative over the past 2 years now, year and a half, 2 years, is about creating more normalcy for children in foster care so that they can be involved in activities that or non-foster youth are involved in, like that they can go out on dates, that they could go to sleep over a friend's house, that they can go on adventures and such. That sometimes it's been hard to get the permission, or resource caregivers have been worried about, like, I don't want them to go to Sandy's, that's really dangerous, you know, and what if I get in trouble? What if someone sues me because I let my foster youth go? Like, and the standard we ended up from the federal government gave us some guidelines, but then we worked on it in Hawaii, and the idea was you treat this young person in your home as you would your own child, and you're a prudent parent and a reasonable parent, but you don't put on extra restrictions to them because they're a foster child. So that has a lot to do with the well-being piece and how we view that part of it. And we wanted to just briefly touch on the ways that we look at these issues, but we're going to try to go through this kind of fast. Yeah. So switching the slide to safety. Teresa, did you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so safety, we look at kind of three key areas. We're looking at how quickly do we get out to see children and families when we've received a report. And then we're looking at making sure that whenever possible, we're maintaining them in their home safely. So that means if we need to, providing services to prevent removal. And a great example of this, something that we're learning through we have a Title 40 waiver, which allows us to use money that used to go for foster care for other ways. It's called an intensive in-home service, and we're using the home builders model. But what it allows us to do is to quickly get out and assess the needs of the family. And then we have this intensive in-home service that works with the family, could be at least 10 hours a week, really trying to understand what's going on, what are the areas of need, what are the points of crisis. And so that helps us with that service maintain the child safely within their home while we're working on helping the family address the needs that we've identified. So it's been very exciting for us to see other ways that we can prevent removal. And the other one is safety and risk management. So that's initial at our first meet, and it's ongoing. So you'll see we do a lot. We do monthly visits with families and children. So we're always constantly assessing the risk issues we've identified and any present safety threats that we need to address right away. And what we hope to see is that with these risk issues we identify, the services that are targeted to meet their needs, hopefully those risk issues will go down and parents will have that increased capacity to care for their children, and we will no longer be involved.
And before I move on, one thing I meant to say at the beginning of this is we have the three areas, right? Safety, permanency, well-being, and then these slides, the next few ones, break it down a bit. And the way we break it down is we want to make sure you understand that we very closely monitor and measure them by breaking them down into specific things that we're looking for. And we have a continuous quality improvement system where we do case reviews on cases, a selection of cases statewide every single year. Throughout the year, we have contracted staff that go around and select cases and thoroughly review them with a very thorough tool and rate how well we're doing in each of these areas. So in these areas that are laid out here, and then we're going to move on to the permanency areas.
And just to add, some people here might have been partners on
Yes.
our review. So we do a process with a state worker from child welfare and a community partner who together review the information and look at our measurements and see how we're doing. So I think
So
some
if
of us have been
any of you are
involved.
interested in doing a review, call Rachel and she'll get you the hookup.
Absolutely.
Or call any of us and we can get you the hookup.
Can you pass that down to Catherine?
Yeah, hi Maddie. Maddie was my partner in my last review.
Oh.
Okay, so just to touch on permanency real quick, we spent some time talking about permanency, especially with your question about why it's so important to have permanency. So I won't cover A, you can read that, that's pretty much related to that. The second piece is that we do want kids to have a permanent connection with somebody. So even if they are going to age out, if they have siblings that are safe, if they have, an auntie or an uncle or somebody that, or a teacher or somebody that they can have a connection with, we really want to maintain those connections. So part of one of the initiatives that Rachel was talking about was prudent parenting. We also have focus on educational stability. So we don't want to move a kid from their school a bunch of times. It's hard on the kid. It's hard on, everything, their peers, their after-school projects, their, sports and all that kind of stuff. So we really focus on preserving connections. And then whenever possible, I think as we mentioned before, doing like a relative placement so that somebody that's familiar to that child, it's not just yanking them, putting them in foster care with a total stranger in a new town with nobody that they have a connection with. And then as far as well-being, which is the last piece, it's also important to learn from the family. So that face-to-face connection, the engagement is really key, and that's another area that we're really trying to focus on right now. Somebody mentioned concurrent planning, I think Teresa did, and so really having conversations with parents up front. This is a really serious, terrifying sometimes time in your life when foster care is or CWS is coming into your home and involved with your kids. So it's really important that we have good engagement with these families to find out what are the services you need. Does your child have a disability that we need to know about, so that we can target those services to help that child and help that family. So we do have a service array that sounds like it's kind of cookie cutter sometimes, but our hope is that they're getting into contracted services or other agencies that are going to do a more thorough assessment and really tailor those services to those families' needs.
Before I move on from these outcomes, I wanted to touch on the handout or the document. Like you have a separate document separate from the slideshow. And this, don't expect it all to make sense. I'm going to draw your attention to what you can gather from this. So every single state in the nation has a child welfare system, and we have a formal database, and then we pull formally from that database and report to our federal government. And we submit our data from our formal database, and then they analyze it in different ways, separate from how we do our own data analysis, and then they report out on certain particular outcomes that they care about. We also care about as well. And so it's actually easier to see an electronic copy than the handout, but there are 3 different colors. There's in the print, there's like a blue, and then there's this grayish purple that looks a lot like the blue, and then there's the orange. And there are these different areas that they care about on the left column, like how fast do kids get to permanency? How fast do kids either get reunified or adopted or move to legal guardianship? And you want it to happen as fast as possible without with it being as safe as possible and not terminating parental rights before you should, without giving them the opportunity to fix things. So the first 3 on that left column are about permanency. How quickly did the kids in care move to permanency? And then the next item is about re-entry into foster care, where you don't want kids coming back, right? That's clearly not a good thing. Although it happens, but you want to keep that as low as possible so that as children are exiting care, you're doing a really thorough assessment about that they're going to be successful in their homes and making sure their families have plans about what to do if something comes up again and resources to support the family. And then the next one is about stability and placement. We talked about that we want children to stay, ideally not move around a lot to different placements. And sometimes that happens, but ideally not all that much, that they might move once, but hopefully not more than that. And that they stay in the same placement. So that's what the placement stability is. When they're in foster care, how many times did they move to different homes? The next item is about when the child is in foster care, were they maltreated in care? And that doesn't necessarily mean that they were maltreated by their resource caregiver. It could mean that in a visit with a parent, they were maltreated. But clearly that's something that should be extremely low. And then the last one is recurrence of maltreatment. This is more generally like after that, not necessarily when they're in care. So one thing you can see, so those are the areas, and then you're like, oh, it's really hard to read. What are they talking about with these numbers? That's why they color-coded it. So then those were, the rows, the rows are the first columns go across, and then the numbers at the very top that label the columns, those are years. So there's 2 parts to every year. There's an A and B part of every year, and it starts and it shows you like 11B, 12A, so the second half of 2011 and the first half of 2012 in that very first, after the column of the stuff, then there's the numbered columns. Does that make sense? Are you following me about that? Okay, and then you go on and it's 20, what? So it's telling you these different periods of time, right? And then when you have the different stuff and you have the different periods of time, then you can see where we're doing well and where we're not doing well. So they coded it that the bluish means that we're performing better than the national standard. It's not a national average, but it's the standard. And then the like grayish purple means that we're at the standard. And then the orange means we're below. We're not doing well. Like we're not at the standard yet. So I know it's really hard to see the difference between the grayish and the blue in the print. It's much easier for the people who are on neighbor islands to see it because the electronic copy, I thought it was very clear. And then I printed it out. I was like, I can barely see it. But anyway, so you can see areas that we're doing not so well in are the reentry because you can see a lot of orange there over the years. Like it hasn't gotten better. But one where you see that we are getting better is placement stability. So in the first couple of columns where you see it, it's orange, and then it moves to that grayish purple, which means we're meeting it, and then it moves to blue, meaning we're exceeding the national standard. So you can see that there's been a positive trend there. And it looks like the only areas that we're really struggling with are still right now where we're below the standard are reentry into care. I know it's kind of hard to read.
So I think overall what this is saying is that we continue to be a work in progress, but we continue to monitor with our families how we can continue to do services and what works and what is not working. But it is we continue to be a work in progress and working towards the best interest of our families and children that we serve.
And this is hot off the press too. This came in my email today. This is from the end of May, so really hot.
I think, Rachel, if we can move forward, we have services that we're going to talk about because we want to be respectful of your time. We have 15 more minutes till the whole thing is supposed to be done. So we want to be respectful of your time. And these are just some of, in the next couple of slides, you'll see some services that we want to highlight. So we do have independent living services for our youth because these are the questions that we talked about, the emancipation. What kind of services are important? We have independent living services for them, which we provide there's 12 to 26 year olds. We do have Imo Kako, which helps them, which there's a whole bunch of slides for age 18 to 21. And then we have higher education. So we do assist our youth that have aged out of the system, whether they're adopted or whether they are under legal guardianship, that we help to pay for their education up to age 26. There's a whole thing called Shakatown, which is an online system that help our youth that have aged out of the system at age 18 be able to access services that will help to move them through, even if they do not have a legal permanent guardian, that will help them to move through their early adulthood so that they do have assistance. So a worker from the department will monitor their Shakatown site and remind them if they need to have certain documents put in, how to access those documents, and that is a lot of what the higher education does. Imo Kako, they can,
I think I could do this pretty quick. Is that okay
if you can chunk it together so we can give them time to
Yep.
answer questions,
Okay.
ask questions.
I'm going to do it really fast, so follow me. We offer youth circles which gather youth together to make their own plans about their future with a whole bunch of supports there. It's a formal system. It's really awesome. We also offer Ohana Connections, which helps. We reach out, we do family finding, and then we work with the young person and people that they want to be connected with, and we bridge that with experts in that area to make sure that they're building those supports. And then Muakako, which is the newer thing, that this works with our young people aftercare. This is voluntary. It's up to them if they want it. And it can go until their 21st birthday. And it started in 2014. And then you need to be involved in one of these things here in order to be eligible for a Muakako. So you either need to be employed 80 hours or more per month, which is not that much in a month. You need to be in college or do vocational training, or you need to be in high school or getting your GED. You could have a medical condition which doesn't allow you to do those things, or you're in a program to remove barriers so that you can do one of those things. And if you're involved in any of those stuff, then you can be eligible for a Muakako. And then what do you get when you're in a Muakako? You get money for every month for your living expenses. You also get money each year for clothing, and you get reimbursement for bus passes, and you get support from a case manager that works on stuff to help you to transition to adulthood very successfully. And then it talks about what the young adult must do. And so you have to demonstrate that you're continuously involved in that eligible activity. You have to meet in person with your case manager once per month. And then you can attend, there are 6-month court hearings. You don't actually have to go live. You can submit your information and not necessarily be there. And then you have to be working toward your goals about independent living. There's support for all different types of folks, no matter what you're doing, whether you're in high school, getting your GED, in the workforce. This is not about a Muakako. This is more broadly. You're doing vocational stuff, or you're in college. So if you're in a Muakako, you can get support no matter which one of those you're doing. If you're not quite 18, you're in the independent living program before, you can get support for all of that. The YC is Youth Circle, so you can get a youth circle that will help you with all of these things. DVR, that's vocational rehab, so you can only get that if you have a documented disability as an adult, but it will provide support in all those areas. There are also grants and scholarships we have, and we have also money, like Lori was mentioning, the higher ed payments, and then also federal money, educational and training vouchers to help our young people when they're interested in higher education. Really cool is also, there's an app. There's an app for your phone that has a whole bunch of resources for independent living for foster youth who are aging out of care. And then we have a slide that just has a whole bunch of resources for the aging out population, the websites, who our statewide independent living collaborator is, who knows like everything that you might want to know about this, and then the Muakako website as well. So that was the very brief part that we went
That
through.
was great, Rachel. You did it.
And then, thanks. That was all of our.
That's great. I think we have time
We
for
all love to talk.
questions.
We all love to talk because we have a huge passion for the work that we do. So that's why we want to share as much as we can, so that everybody else can have that same
There
passion
you go,
as
the
we
app
do.
on your phone. I have it on my phone. Download for free.
And we have this on the handout.
Yes. Anybody have questions
If we do 1 or 2 from the room and then save 1 or 2 for the
for the TV land
Yeah.
people?
So questions from the room?
Yes.
Like if there was a case of like news and you're already like talking with the family like to investigate and everything, and if then let's say after a month or 2 the parents decide to move out of state, what happens then? I mean, are you then, would you know where the family is moving?
would you be in contact with the state that they're moving to?
Yes. So if we know where they're going, if they don't just up and leave and we don't know where they are, we would hopefully make a succession plan so that we can continue to work, or the state that they're moving to will continue to provide services for them. There is something called the Interstate Compact for the Placement of Children, which is a national, all 50 states and Puerto Rico, I think, are involved with the Interstate Compact, and that's how we connect from state to state regarding child welfare. So hopefully we would be able to have a succession plan for them when they do move. If they just up and leave, other states may find them or be in contact with them, and then they could call Hawaii if they know that they were last in Hawaii, and we would share information. Any other questions?
One more question, then we'll go there.
I'll be loud. Do you keep statistics on what percentage of your youth have disabilities and whether they have emotional and behavioral disabilities?
We do have some statistics on that. I would say it's not comprehensive. But our caseworkers are able to document in our database these disabilities, but we are aware that not all of them are fully documented. So we have, a certain percentage are, but we know that it's not 100% that are fully documented in our system. So we do have some statistics on it, yes.
I'm just curious as to whether the population is, the percentage of kids in receiving your services are above the average that you would expect in the community. Kids with disabilities end up receiving your support more often.
So I don't know that we've done exactly that analysis that you're looking for, but the percentage of foster youth that receive special education services is much higher than the general population. But that doesn't necessarily mean there's a disability, because often they've missed school because of placements, or they were kept out of school due to neglect. So it's hard to know. But we have some statistics on the special education. We also have some statistics on those that are involved with diagnosed mental health issues, it is indeed higher than the general population, but it's not clear exactly if this was the case before, So we haven't teased it all apart, and I'm not sure we've done exactly the analysis that you're looking at, but we have some information. Do you want to say more?
Thanks. So maybe if we can do so, if anybody online has a question. So folks in VTC land, Maddie, Andrea, Spencer, Kim, anybody questions?
Can I just ask you to go back one slide to that picture where you had the app?
Oh, you want the app?
Thank you.
TV Land people, any questions? All good?
Okay, thanks. I think that's it. Then let's give our presenters another round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was really excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.